Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today's session. And I'm really happy to be part of this community and really happy to see you all here today. So, if you're joining from the other part of the world, good morning, good afternoon, whatever. So, thank you once again for joining. Let's start the discussion. So, today my topic is about streamlining or simplifying GraphQL API development. So, before start the topic, let me introduce myself quickly. I'm Anupama Pathirage. I'm currently working as a director and also head of engineering integration at WSO2. WSO2 is open source middleware software development company. We are specialized in API management, integration, identity and access management, and so on. We are in the domain for more than nearly 20 years now. So we develop a lot of open source platforms as well. So I'm representing one of those today. And also I'm representing the open source community of Ballerina, although I'm part of WSO2. So welcome once again for the discussion. So as per the today's topic, what we are going to discuss is basically GraphQL application development. That's one of the usually integration application developments involved in many different protocols, many different technology stacks. And as developers or as business leaders or whoever in the technology domain, especially, you have to take multiple decisions, especially when it comes to the right set of technology, whether you are using the right set of technology, whether it's maintainable, whether it's how developer friendly it is, and whether it is catering your future needs. Likewise, you have to face so many challenges, and also especially in the technical domain, technology domain, you have to keep up to date with the trending things on new technologies as well. So that's what I'm targeting today, and I'm using Ballerina as a language or integration technology to discuss some use cases. And let's uh, deep dive a little bit into the GraphQL as well, just to refresh our memory. And I know all of you are very much familiar with GraphQL, given that you are part of GraphQL community, or else if you are very much new to the GraphQL, I think that will be a good chance. I will take a couple of minutes just to discuss what is GraphQL and the usage so that we can relate it to the scenario that we are building as well. So GraphQL is basically a query language for APIs, and also we can define it as a runtime. So why two things? Because query language means GraphQL allows its clients to specify what they need. So the clients can be web applications, desktop applications, or it can be mobile applications, whatever. Each client has, although it's related to the same use case or same solution, they have different data needs. So GraphQL allows the clients to precisely specify what they need. So that will be a very huge advantage when we have multiple different types of client applications. And also we can define GraphQL as a runtime. It works with your existing data sources and infrastructure, and it facilitates client queries, and also it facilitates a lot of tooling capabilities because of that nature. So it is the both things, and usage of GraphQL is somewhat new comparative to the other technologies or protocols, but we have to understand when to use it, why we should use it. So before that, if we talk about the history a little bit, it started around 2012 by Facebook, and they released it as an open source project in 2015. And in 2018, it was moved to the GraphQL Foundation, which is a nonprofit Linux foundation. So it's a very popular open source or a very popular technology and specification as of now. You can see how the technologies or protocols, API protocol landscape has evolved over the last couple of decades. So when compared with the history, GraphQL, gRPC, those kind of technologies are new. But it's not very new because we are living with the GraphQL world nearly decade now. So there's a very high adaptation from the use case point of view. People are trying to use GraphQL. So it's very important to understand when to use it, why use it. So that's what I'm going to cover first. In GraphQL, if you're familiar with REST, or HTTP protocol, we have many operations like get, put, post, delete to deal with the data. Similar to that, GraphQL also has operations. There are three types of operations. The first thing is query, that is to fetch data from the server, similar to HTTP GET request in certain ways. And also we have mutations, that is to modify data of the server. And it can be creating data, updating data, or deleting data, whatever. And also subscriptions. That means real-time updates from the server. Usually when it comes to real-time updates, we are somewhat familiar with WebSocket as a old technology or technology which was there for a long time. But we can use GraphQL also effectively for this kind of scenarios. And it is very much flexible because of the data-oriented nature of the GraphQL. So with all these things together, it provides a very complete toolkit or very comprehensive toolkit to interact with your data and with your API. So that's what we are going to explore. So usual question that we get all the time when we are designing solutions as part of our day-to-day life, we have a use case. Usually we have to decide right set of protocols as well as technologies. So when we say somebody that we have to use GraphQL for this, then the first question comes usually is why GraphQL? Why not REST? So that's the usual question. So that's why we need to understand what are the advantages of the GraphQL. One major thing is precise data fetching. As I mentioned before, clients can simply request what they need, not more, not less. So that will avoid the problem of underfetching or fetching of the data. We can discuss a little bit again in few upcoming slide with example. So that's a huge advantage. And also, GraphQL is strongly typed. It has a strongly typed schema, and schema, it has a specification, and it defines exactly the structure of the API, what data it can return, the types of the data, whether data can be null. Likewise, it can define all these things related to the data. So that's a huge value addition because then the client will not get surprised with the data that they are getting. It is adhering to the right schema. And also, GraphQL, it can usually work with single endpoint. If we are working with REST, usually we have to deal with multiple endpoints because when querying multiple data or different data entity types, we have to use different endpoints. But in GraphQL, with one endpoint, we can utilize the query capabilities to make it just a single endpoint, but to serve multiple different data and types or entities. And also API evolution. Usually with time, we have to update the APIs, what we are returning and what sort of data types or additional data and things like that. If it is a backward compatible change, even with a backward compatible change in REST world, usually the practice is we have to update the API versions. Otherwise, the receiving party or the clients can break when they receive additional data. But with GraphQL, we don't have that problem because still the client can request the data that they were receiving so far using the same query, even though the latest API is having additional data. So we can clarify it using some of the sample that we are using. Other thing is it's language agnostic. GraphQL can be implemented in any programming language. Most of the programming languages are having the support for GraphQL. And with that, we can use many different technical stacks if we are developing an application with GraphQL. So that is why it's a protocol, it's a specification, and it's not tightly bound to any language or any platform or any product or anything like that. So it's very much flexible and it offers many advantages than the other protocols that we are using. At the same time, we have to clearly understand when not to use it as well. So the usual question that comes is REST versus GraphQL. Why we should use why we should use GraphQL instead of REST. So this is a typical example that we can find in the GraphQL documentation. We have two clients and this is more like post like Facebook kind of a system where there are user has certain details associated with the users and they have posts, and they have followers. Let's say the client has a need to display certain properties of each of these. Let's say only the name and the title of the post that that user has posted, and the followers of that given user. If we need only those information at the client side, still, because in the REST world, those are defined in three different endpoints: users, post, and followers. That means we have to do 3 network calls, and we have to process the data in order to capture only the required information. Although we need only the name out of the user details, we still get all the user details usually as per the API definition of the HTTP or the REST service. Then we have to filter out unnecessary data. Same goes with other requests as well. So we have to send more requests, and also we are getting more data. So that's the problem with REST. Actually, it's not a problem. That's the nature of the REST. Clients have to deal with that. And if you are using GraphQL for the same problem, same solution, we can send just one request, and we can specify, client can specify exactly what they need. They need only the name, they need the post, the title of the post, and the name of the followers. And we can provide additional parameters like we need only the last 3 followers. Likewise, there's a query capability, which is very much useful to gather only the required data, and that is a very sophisticated query language which can specify a lot of things related to the data. So in one single response, we will get all the required details. So that's the main value addition of using GraphQL. And then the next question is when to use GraphQL. So GraphQL is not the solution for all the problems, all the integration problems, because uh, if we first talk about when to use GraphQL, let's say you have complex system which is having interrelated data. That part is very important. If the data entities are not that tightly coupled, they are very independent data entities. For example, one entity is employee, another entity is post, and if those things are not related, we don't need to use GraphQL in such scenarios. If the data is interrelated, it's very much flexible, because in a single query you can make those associations, and you can aggregate or manipulate whatever the data and fetch it. So that's one scenario when to use GraphQL. And the other thing is flexibility in client data requirements. Usually, if the given solution has to deal with various type of clients, like mobile applications, web applications, sometimes mobile applications are resource constrained, so that they should not do a lot of processing. In such scenarios, the mobile application or that client should request only the data they need. If they are receiving a big payload, that's a huge resource consumption for that application. Likewise, if there are specific client requirements, GraphQL is the ideal choice. And also sometimes client requirements are changing. They need different sort of data. They need sometimes create dashboard out of different data types, different data fields. And that if that requirements are changing frequently, in REST world, it's kind of creating another API to cater that set of data. But in GraphQL, it's very easy, because client can adjust their queries and send the query to the server. The server can do the job. At the same time, that means we are passing the responsibility to the server. Server has to do a lot of things. Server has more things to do compared to the REST cases. And then usually, as I mentioned before, usual question is whether GraphQL is going to replace REST. No, it's not the case. GraphQL will not replace the REST. Still, simple CRUD operations, REST is the ideal solution. And if the data is not interrelated, not much value of using GraphQL, unless there's some resource constructions or client side requirements of controlling data. And also if there are high complexity queries, and if you have to deal with a lot of joining large data sets, likewise, if the queries are very complex, sometimes it can lead into very complex situation in the server if we are using GraphQL, because of the flexibility of the query language, client can request many different combinations. So that will need many processing power, a lot of processing power in the server side. So we have to be careful if you are using GraphQL for such solutions, not to overuse the server resources. So that's why we need to understand the real problem, use cases, and whether GraphQL is the right solution or not. So today I'm going to discuss how Ballerina, which is a technology for integration. We can define it as a programming language, and also we can define it as an integration technology. So I'm discussing how it can help the application developers to simplify their development cycles if they are developing a GraphQL application. Actually, Ballerina is not only for GraphQL, it is an integration technology which can handle any other protocol. But today's session, I'm going to highly focus on GraphQL scenarios. So if you ask what is Ballerina, so the name sounds like a dance, and it has some relationship with the dance as well. I'll come to that later. So it's an open source cloud native technology which is optimized for integration. So it's if you're familiar with programming language like Java, C++, Go, Kotlin, Python, whatever, Ballerina is similar to that. It can solve any programming problem, not just integration programming problems like any other programming language. But the difference is why we need another programming language. That's a usual question that we are getting. The reason is it's optimized for integration. Sometimes different programming languages are specialized in different things. Ballerina is specialized in integration. Although we can use it for any generic problem, still we can use any other language for such generic problems. But if you have some integration problem in hand, you can consider using Ballerina, and because it's optimized for integration. It was started, the discussions and the prototyping, compiler development, everything started around 2016. And we released the first major version, which we call Ballerina Swan Lake, in February 2022. So it's initially developed by WSO2, but we have a huge open source community around us who are contributing, using it freely, as well as uh, helping out with the Ballerina community. It has rich ecosystem of different data service types, data formats, connectors, and many things to make it easy for integration developers. And also one other important thing is it's a language, but it has text representation as well as a graphical representation. So I can show it when we are moving to the demo. Every piece of code that you are writing, you will get equivalent diagram out of that code. And also, since it's a language, it has all the language capabilities, and it has a compiler on its own. With those compilers, we have many optimized things for the developers, like efficient concurrency handling mechanisms, some concurrency warnings at the compile time itself, so that you will not lead into runtime issues at the runtime level. Likewise, it is very much optimized for integration scenarios because network applications, so integration applications are concurrent by nature. We can't avoid concurrency in the integration or network applications. But if you have ever debug an application which is having a concurrency problem of an integration application, it's very hard. But the Ballerina can give some concurrency related hints, warnings, and other things, which will help you to detect those problems, data crisis, and other deadlock kind of conditions beforehand. So right now we are using the Ballerina Swan Lake version. That is the latest version, which was released in 2022. So as I mentioned before, it's all about integrations. And it's a full programming language, but it's more than a programming language. It's a full platform, full framework, which is having many different tooling, protocol support, connector support, and so on. So the difference is the abstractions it provides. So on top of, if you are familiar with any other language, it has the same syntax family like C, C++ languages. So if you are familiar with any language, learning Ballerina is very easy because it is not a separate DSL. It's another language. You can, if you are familiar with one language, it's very easy. Only thing is, we are providing more abstractions than a usual language to make it easy for the integration developers. And also we have tooling support to enhance the developer productivity as well as the maintainability of the solutions. And also it's not a research product. Many existing open source users are using it in production, and also WSO2 customers are there. They are using it. So it's a technology and with many wider usage in the integration domain. So I talked about abstractions. If we discuss what are these abstractions usually, we provide abstractions in three different levels. The first thing is data. When it comes to integration applications, data is something that we cannot avoid because we are always communicating data or manipulate data, we represent data, we just convert them here and there. Likewise, data plays a huge or big part in the system. So data representation is very important thing in integration world, and Ballerina pays a special attention to data, special things like JSON, XML are first class types in Ballerina, like string, int in other languages. You can manipulate easily like any other data type. You can convert it. You can data bind from incoming resources. Things like that is very easy. And also network means we have to support different type of services, clients, and we should have easy mechanism to avoid unnecessary complexities when defining or writing services. Usually we don't, if we have to deal with underneath network complexities, it's very hard or it's very inefficient. But Ballerina provides many constructs to avoid that thing when it comes to different protocols as well as different types of applications like server applications, client applications. And the last thing is the concurrency. As I mentioned before, concurrency safety is one of the important thing. And Ballerina provides concurrency related advanced operations or advanced warnings so that developers can save time in the production issue debugging. So today's session, let's discuss a little bit about GraphQL and Ballerina, how they are going together, what sort of capabilities we have around it. So when talking about that, GraphQL, Ballerina can simplify your GraphQL development efforts. It has many similarities and it goes hand in hand in many areas. The first thing is similarity between the type system. If you're familiar with GraphQL specifications, it has very well-defined type schema. So it defines the different operation types, whether mutations or query types, and also what are the associated data types. So Ballerina type system as well as the GraphQL schema representation is very much similar. And also data-oriented nature of Ballerina helps a lot when it comes to that application development because Ballerina has focused set of data representations like records and other things which are very much similar to GraphQL world, which can map one-to-one very easily. And also type safety and concurrency, which is a must for any GraphQL application, and built-in network abstractions. Usually GraphQL means we are developing a server or maybe a client. So if we have built-in abstractions to develop such a service within a couple of seconds or minutes, that's a great big value addition. So those are the similarities. And I will go through these when we discuss about the demo. But in simple, or if I summarize what value additions it provides, it has a visual designer to design your GraphQL application. And it is something like this. You can visualize your GraphQL application. This is VS Code view. I will open it up in a couple of minutes. You can see the source code in the left side, and in the right side, you can see the GraphQL designer, where you can see the relationships of different data types and what are the different operations we have. And likewise, visual design is very much helpful when designing the application. And also, Ballerina support both code first and schema first approaches. That means if you have the schema at hand, you can generate the GraphQL, Ballerina GraphQL service code using the Ballerina GraphQL CLI. That is the schema first approach. On the other hand, if you are developing your GraphQL application from scratch, you can use the Ballerina code And after that, you can generate the schema out of it so that you can share it with the rest of the clients and so on. So with this GraphQL Ballerina CLI, you have the support to develop both ways. And it's just a matter of, if you are using the schema first approach, the tool will generate the skeletons, servers, and clients and other things for you, and data types as well, based on the schema. Then it's just a matter of implementing the business rules or business logic additionally. And also, Ballerina has out of the box support for subscriptions as well, not just the mutations and queries, because in some frameworks, subscriptions are a bit tricky to implement. We had to use separate libraries, third-party things, and other things, and do some multiple steps to get subscriptions working. But Ballerina, it's very intuitive. And built-in GraphQL client, we have a client to test your applications, and it's very easy. You don't have to use separate tools if you are developing a server applications to test it. And one other thing is the data loader support. Usually, if we don't design the GraphQL application properly, it will lead into many problems. Like if you are familiar with N+1 problem in GraphQL, uh, we'll send more queries than needed to the data source if you are not designing properly. So Ballerina has data loader support, which can mitigate that problem, and also server-side caching to avoid unnecessary data source data fetching. All these things are inbuilt. You don't have to use any other libraries or anything else. It comes as part of the framework. And same goes with the GraphQL Federation. If you're familiar with Federation, it means, in simple terms, instead of building one single graph out of the data, we can separate it out into subgraphs, and then those subgraphs can be combined into create one single supergraph. So Ballerina has this support, and it will help to decompose or break your problems into different parts based on the context. And also, Ballerina comes with security features, and all the client and server side security mechanisms are very much familiar across the protocols, whether it's GraphQL, REST, or anything, WebSocket. The same security principles, authentication, authorization mechanisms can be easily applied. And with GraphQL also, we have that support. So having said that, I'll not take much time to explain what it is and the capabilities in high level. I will use my code view to visualize it and um, show you some real example of how it's happening. Before that, Ballerina, since I mentioned it as a programming language, it works with the familiar toolset, VS Code as a primary code editor, because it has Ballerina VS Code plugin has a support for the visual capabilities. And if you are interested in using visual capabilities, VS Code plugin, which you can download from the marketplace, can help a lot. And also, since it's a language, you can commit the code into any source code repository you want, and you can use any custom or whatever CI/CD processes you are using already. You can use the same things without changing it. And deployment point of view, you can deploy it anywhere, whether it's cloud or premise or your own private data plane, it's totally fine. And also it can integrate with your production or runtime tools, including observability, logging, and those capabilities. So since it's a part of the wider technical ecosystem, we can reuse almost all of the technology stack associated with programming languages to develop the applications. And as I mentioned about the deployment capabilities, let me finish it up with this thing. If you issue build command for a Ballerina application, it will generate the Docker images, Kubernetes files, and other artifacts just by mentioning these parameters. It's just a matter of customizing these default parameters after that, but it will do the job for you. You can then use these generated files for your deployment directly. So let's go to the demo part. For that, I'm using my CLI first to showcase what it looks like. So I have already installed by Ballerina. Hope you can see my terminal. So Ballerina comes with CLI tool, And if you issue the version command, you can see Ballerina is installed. Before that, if you are interested in using Ballerina, you can simply go to ballerina.io and you can download it. You can download it from the download page, and it is having all the examples. Sorry, it is hosted on GitHub site, and GitHub is having some glitches today. So we have the learn examples and all the other things in this website. You can download and use it freely without any license or anything. And then after you install, Bell command comes in, and you can create new Ballerina projects using or Ballerina packages using this command. So it's just a matter of issuing, let's say I'm in an empty project, empty folder. Let's move to an empty folder. So I'm in an empty folder. If I issue Bell new command with whatever the project name, let's say test. So you can see new folder created with 2 files. So if I open it up, this is our very first Ballerina project that I have created without anything in it. It's an empty kind of project with some templates. So I open it in the VS Code plugin, VS Code, which is, I'm already having the Ballerina plugin installed here. That's why you see let me maximize it a little bit so that you can see it. So this is the VS Code. After I open it from the VS Code, you can see the 2 files. One is the main.bell. So you can see it's like any other programming language. You can have one main function and just print hello world here. So I used the run command here. It is compiling the source. That's why I mentioned it's a programming language. And it's printing out the output as hello world as expected. So this is a very simple Ballerina program. And other files are Ballerina toml, which is a kind of meta file, which identifies a given folder as a Ballerina package. So it includes what version that I have used to create the package, name of the package, my user organization. This is used when we are sharing packages across different people. Like if you are familiar with Maven repository, similar to that we have Ballerina Central, which is artifact sharing repository, where you can use your organization name or your personal organization, whatever, to share your packages. So this is like a simple Ballerina application, how it looks like. I created a new application to give you a sense of what it is. Basically, you don't have to use any other tool or any other product thing to use it. It's just a matter of installing the Ballerina plugin. So I have already installed it. If you can download it from the Ballerina marketplace. I already installed it. So that's about the Ballerina initial development experience. Then let's look at some example that I have developed using Ballerina related to GraphQL. So if I explain that scenario a little bit, it is, let me open up the demo slide a little bit to explain the scenario first. So I'm going to explain a movie rating system, which is having many related data, which is this is a demo scenario, which is a very simple thing, not a complex data requirement, but at the same time, what I'm going to highlight here is movie rating system is dealing or loading data from MySQL database, and it is having 4 different entities as movie. Movie can have director, and a given movie can have multiple reviews, and users can give multiple reviews. Likewise, this is a rating system where users can come and rate given movies and find the details about the movies. So that is the backend server side application that I'm going to show, which is implemented using Ballerina, which is a GraphQL application. So that's the overview of the sample. Let's open it up. So this is already developed just to save time. But if I open up my previous temporary service that we created already. So we should, in this scenario, we are interested in developing a service, not a main function, because main is not interested or not interesting in this case. So we can delete it. And what we are developing is a service. So these are the abstractions that I mentioned. In Ballerina, we have many different service abstractions, HTTP, GraphQL, and so on. If you are developing a GraphQL service, what you have to do is using these code snippets, you can fill it up and you can give base paths and you can provide the listener. Let's say it's listening on port 9090. And so it just like this. It's like you are creating a class in other languages. So service is created and then it's just matter of adding resource functions. I'll show that in the real example. So this is a kind of code snippet. It says this service is listening on GraphQL protocol on port 9090. So service is one such abstraction, which is not available in many other programming languages. Like you define class or structs or records, we can define services. And when you attach it with the GraphQL listener, it will become a GraphQL service. And if you attach it with, let's say, HTTP listener, it will become HTTP service. So likewise, creating services, and similar to that, we have clients, HTTP client, GraphQL clients, and so on. Clients and services are very natural and having intuitive syntax in the language. So that's what we are going to use in our application. Let me open up the developed application again. So it's this one. So you can see it's not running yet. I explain the service a little bit and then run it. So if I collapse these things just to understand, you can see this is a GraphQL service which is running on port 9090 and we have resource functions. So these resource functions are mapping into the GraphQL mutations, queries, and so on. And the intention of Ballerina is to make it very intuitive for the developers, which is like writing a normal function. So service is like a class in other languages, but kind of a collection, which is listening on this port. And then the resource function means like a normal function in the language, where this defines whether it's a get or post or something like that related to HTTP world. In GraphQL, it's always get. And this is the name of the resource or the query or the mutation. And this is return types. What are the types that we are returning out of it? And here you can see pipe or error. That means this can return movie array or error. In Ballerina, we have union types. That's what's represented by this type. So that means if there's some underneath problem or complexity underneath, let's say, network problem, then instead of returning movie array, if the database is unaccessible and things like that, it can return an error so that client can handle the error. So likewise, it clearly try to resemble the experience like writing a normal function. And we can have input parameters, which is getting accessible within the function logic. I will explain that when we do the demo. So after filling out this skeleton, after creating this outer layer, it's just a matter of defining the data types and the return types and other business logic. So other important thing is the types. So if we look at if our types defined in the Ballerina, so you can see movie, director, user, and review, which is very much related to the scenario that I have explained. And you can see the types are defined in a way it has resolver functions to address the given user query. And you can have any business logic within that so that when resolving a given field, it can have any additional computations if needed. So likewise, the schema of the GraphQL and schema and the actions, that is mutations, queries, etc., are very much mapping one-to-one when it comes to language. Another thing is I wanted to show the visual designer. If you open this visualize link, you can see the service that you are developing. So if I zoom it a little bit, you can see how these are interrelated. We have service with multiple query types, one mutation, and some with input parameters. And these two are dealing with reviews, and review is related with movie, and movie is related with director, and also review is related with users. Likewise, your data in relationships are clearly shown, and that is very important when designing as well as maintaining the application. You don't need to go through the full logic of your source code to understand how they are related. Even if someone is joining your project in a future phase, you can see how those things are related easily using this. You don't have to do anything explicitly. These are automatically generated. And also, we have other capabilities, visual capabilities, uh, like if you open any programming file in your Ballerina application, you can see corresponding sequence diagram out of it. So this is not very interesting because it's only calling database, but let's say your application has many data sources to deal with. It can be MySQL database, Oracle database, or it can be different data sources like Google Sheets and things like that. Then when you are using it in Ballerina, you can see how those are interrelated. For example, this is some example like that. You can see the source code on the left side, automatically generated VS Code diagram on the right side. So if you copy paste this code, you will get the same diagram in VS Code without anything additionally. So by looking at the diagram, you can see this application is connected to GitHub and getting some data, and then it is connected to Google Sheets and write some data and do some processing and again write some data. So likewise, without looking into the source code, you can understand what's going on, and it is very useful if you're having large complex code which is interacting with multiple network resources and things like that. Each of these lifelines are very much closer to the usual sequence diagram inception or the idea that we are having. It represents a different network endpoint or a worker, and within one single lifeline, it's just the same thread or same worker, or it can be uh, another network entity which is we are interacting. So that's about the visual capabilities. Let's move back to the GraphQL thing. So once the service skeleton is defined, it's just a matter of implementing the service. So here, let me run the service first so that it's easier to explain. It has 4 resources, and let me expand the code again. So what I'm doing is, for example, get movies means it's calling to database. If I show you my database, it has 4 tables. In the movie database, we have 4 tables as directors, movies, reviews, and users. It's very simple without any joins and other things. I used this version to simplify the scenario. And in the service, when you invoke the movies query, you can see it is calling the database and fetching data. And then you will think, okay, where that GraphQL resolution, all these things happen. Actually, that complexity is handled by the language itself. If we run the program, so you can easily run it using run command. Now I am within this directory and I'm issuing run command. It will compile the program and run it, and it will open up the service in the port 9090 in my local machine. So you don't have to do anything explicitly to run it in a server or anything like that. You can see it's running, and Ballerina has built-in graphical client support. You can open it up in your browser, and here you can see my graphical client. I have some predefined queries. So this is to get movies. So let's say uh, I need to get all the movies. So you can see, you can, this is in left hand side, we have the usual GraphQL query. You can query whatever the details. That all resolution and everything happens by the GraphQL listener and the service type. And you just have to focus on the business logic. For example, in the director, if you want the other fields like bio, you can request it. You can see things are resolving correctly. And in Ballerina code, what we have is in the service, what we have is a get movies. It loads the movies, and the resolution logic works well just to return only the required data. And also, let's say some other capabilities like directors, it's again like same. You can query all the directors. You can see in the database, I have multiple director entries. And if you want to get only given director details, you can query by ID. So this is usual GraphQL syntax. You can give an ID and query. Let's say I want to have a director ID 3. So you can see this detail. So how we have handled it in the GraphQL is, application is, if you go back to the service, you can see this is a director's resource and it has optional field called ID. So this question mark means, string question mark means this field can be either string value, input value can be string, or it can be null. So if it is null, we are returning all the directors. If it is not null, this is checking whether the input parameter is null. And if it is not null, it will return only that director given by the ID. So this is the flexibility. You can define input parameters and other things. Those are automatically getting mapped into your resource function. You don't have to do anything explicitly. So this string ID you can access within your business logic, and you can do whatever with that. So here I'm simply using it for my MySQL query. So if we go back to this thing, since it's an optional field defined as string or nil, you can even avoid it. So if we run this query like this, you can see all the directors in the result set. So likewise, review is one thing, another resource type. So this is to fetch all the reviews for all the movies. And let's say I want to add review. It is a mutation. So if we look at the source code again, you can see add review is also similar to that. Only difference is like resource function versus remote function. It's like your usual HTTP world, we have resource functions to retrieve data. And in the RPC or gRPC or whatever the RPC world, we have remote functions to do some changes. So that's the difference. Other than that, name is there, input types are there, and return types are there. So what I'm telling here is I need to do mutation, which is add review. And after doing the mutation, that mutation basically adding a review based on the user input. And after that, it will return the review. So that's my scenario. Then let's try to add a review. So here we have a couple of reviews. Let's add one more review. So since this application defined the review type as the input, you can provide input type as a variable in your application, client application. So let's say score type is 2, movie, I'm reviewing the movie ID 1, and let's add some description. Something like this. And let's say for some user authentication scenario purposes, if we have user ID, I'm just hard coding it, maybe user ID as 2. So let's run this. So this is a mutation. You can see, because I am defining my application as to return review as the output after doing this, you can see the review is returned. You can add more fields of the review if needed, or you can remove it. Let's say if you only need the ID, you can get the ID. So if you go to the get reviews query again, you should be able to see the newly created review there, because this one, movie excellent and very happy movie for the movie ID 1. This is the one we added via a mutation. So within this business or within these resource functions, you can do whatever other business logics and everything without thinking about the underlying resolutions, how the parameters are getting added to the, how you can access the parameters, input parameters, how you can return the different types, how you can using data loader, especially the data loader capability also here. If you go to the types definitions, this is my movie type definition. If I expand it, you can see there are different resolver functions. You can add additional logics there. Instead of simply getting director details for each movie. For example, in movies, we can get the directors like this, and this is querying another table. So that means another DB query. So you can use data loaders to avoid the n+1 problem here. You can read about it in the internet resources and so on to understand what's n+1 problem, but it's basically to reduce the queries that we are sending and optimize it. So we can add different data loaders and optimize it instead of querying it independently. And also you can add any business value, business logic in between if you want to do some processing in between. So this is the application that I wanted to show. And some other GraphQL capabilities. For example, you can define maximum query depth. These are configurable values. You can provide them as configurable values. In Ballerina, actually, I forgot to mention, for example, in database, you have to configure the host username, password, and so on as the usual practice. So these were loaded from this config toml where I have provided my DB details. You can provide it as a config.toml file in the same directory path, or you can use environment variables and you can mount config files into a file system if you are using some other deployment platforms. Likewise, you can use whatever the mechanisms to provide your configurations. Sometimes we have to pay special attention on security and other things. One such thing that I'm explaining here, query depth. Query depth analysis means we have to restrict certain levels. Sometimes people can misuse the system, so they can request many different levels, so that system or the server will get overloaded because server has to do the job in the background to load all the data from multiple data sources. So for example, in this here, it goes to 3 levels. And if I define the query depth as, here it's 25, but let's say I restart the service by defining it as 2, you will not be able to get this many details because I restricted it to 2 levels. So after changing the configurations, I'm running the service again. Service is running now. And when I execute this, here actually I define it as 2. So that's why 2 levels are given. Sorry about it. Let's say I define it as 1. In that case, I will not rerun because of the time limitations. Then we will not see this level. It will give an error directly saying you are trying to fetch details by bypassing the depth level defined. Likewise, you can limit the data. You can do whatever the security mechanisms to analyze the headers, incoming user, authentication, authorization related things. So all these things are uh, provided by the language itself. It's just a matter of using them properly in your application. So yeah, that's about the demo. Let me go back to my slides again to finish up the session. So Ballerina is, as I mentioned before, you can try it out, and if you are interested, you can use it. And we have a community, huge community around it who can support, who can um, you can use our Discord channel, Stack Overflow, GitHub, because source code is open. Even you can contribute for the internal developments as well as you can raise issues and other things. You can refer to the land pages and other things to learn about the language and the platform. And apart from that, we have a huge community around us. We do tech talks, trainings, university programs, and other things as part of the community efforts. Most of all of them are free and like community events. If you subscribe or join with our community page, you can see all the community sessions and upcoming sessions and so on. And university program is one of other important thing we are doing. It's a recent thing that we started. If you are coming from education background, whether you are a lecturer or student, feel free to write to us. It's not about teaching ballerina. We are not teaching ballerina there. What we are doing is like we are talking with universities and we are helping the lecturers as well as student communities to teach something which is valuable for their subject or curriculum, and then use ballerina as a language of teaching. That's the only thing that we are doing basically as part of ballerina. We will help the student groups and lecturers, and some universities are using Ballerina as a language of teaching for different network or programming related concepts. So we are helping out all of them. So if you are coming from educational domain or background, yeah, feel free to write to us. All the details are in the community page. We are happy to help. So that's about my session today. Thank you so much for listening and joining the session. And if you have any questions, I think we can take them now.